The spaceport bar, the rusty airlock, was a haven for the weary and the wary. Nestled in the shadow of a towering docking bay, its neon sign flickered erratically, casting a kaleidoscope of colors over the cracked pavement. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. Patrons of a dozen species crowded the room, their voices blending into a symphony of languages. At the center of it all was Jack Griffin, the bartender. Griff moved behind the bar with the ease of a man who had spent decades in its embrace. His hands were steady as he poured a glass of synth whiskey for a hulking Zorgalian trader, his eyes scanning the room with practiced calm. At 55, Griff had the weathered look of a man who had seen too much but still found reasons to smile. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and a faint scar ran along his jawline, a souvenir from a life he rarely spoke of. "Here you go, big guy," Griff said, sliding the glass across the bar. "Don't drink it all at once. That stuff's stronger than it looks." The Zorgalian grunted in thanks, his 4 eyes narrowing as he took a cautious sip. Griff chuckled and turned to the next customer, a human woman with grease-streaked hands and a tool belt slung low on her hips. "Zara," he greeted, his voice warm. "What'll it be tonight?" "The usual." Zara grinned, leaning against the bar. "You know me too well, Griff, but make it a double. It's been one of those days." As Griff prepared her drink, Zara glanced around the room, her sharp eyes missing. Nothing. She was in her late 30s, with a wiry frame and a mind that could dismantle a starship engine and put it back together blindfolded. Her friendship with Griff went back years, forged in the fires of shared hardships and late-night conversations. "Anything interesting come through today?" she asked, nodding toward the crowded room. Griff shrugged. The usual mix of traders, smugglers and dreamers. Oh, and Luma's in her usual corner sketching away. Zara followed his gaze to a slender, ethereal figure seated near the window. Luma was a Zalarian, her skin a soft, iridescent blue, and her large, almond-shaped eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She held a stylus in one delicate hand, her movements fluid as she captured the scene before her on a holographic canvas. "Still trying to figure out what she sees in this place," Zara muttered. Griff smiled. "She says it's the people, calls us a tapestry of life." Zara snorted. "Poetic. I'll stick to engines, less existential." Griff laughed, but his smile faded as the door slid open, admitting a trio of newcomers. They were tall, their scaly skin glistening under the neon lights, and their eyes glowed with a predatory intensity. Griff's instincts, honed by years of military service, went on high alert. "Trouble?" Zara asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. "Maybe," Griff replied, his voice low. "Stay sharp." The leader of the group, a hulking reptilian with a jagged crest running down his spine, approached the bar. His name was Krell, though Griff didn't know that yet. Krell's gaze swept the room before settling on Griff, and there was something in that look, a cold, calculating menace, that set Griff's teeth on edge. "Human," Krell said, his voice a guttural rumble. "I hear you serve the best drinks in the port." Griff forced a smile, his hand subtly reaching for the stun baton hidden beneath the bar. "That's what they tell me. What'll it be?" Krell leaned forward, his breath reeking of something foul. "Surprise me." As Griff turned to mix the drink, he caught Zara's eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. She slipped away, her movements casual but deliberate, heading toward the bar's control panel. Griff's mind raced. These weren't ordinary patrons. They were hunters, and he was their prey. The drink he placed before Krell was a concoction, of his own making, a potent blend of alien spirits guaranteed to knock even a Zorgalian on their backside. Krell took a sip, his expression unreadable, but Griff noticed the way his claws tightened around the glass. "Not bad," Krell said, setting the glass down. "For a human." Griff's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Glad you like it. Anything else I can do for you?" Krell's gaze hardened. "Yes, you can die quietly." The words hung in the air for a split second before chaos erupted. Krell lunged across the bar, his claws slashing toward Griff's throat. Griff ducked, his reflexes still sharp, and brought the stun baton up in a swift arc. The weapon crackled as it connected with Krell's side, sending the alien reeling. Zara, meanwhile, had reached the control panel. With a few quick taps, she activated the bar's security systems. Holographic barriers sprang up around the room, dividing the patrons from the fight. Luma, ever the pacifist, stayed in her corner, her stylus moving furiously as she documented the scene. Griff and Krell circled each other, the bar now their arena. Krell was stronger, but Griff was faster, his movements precise and calculated. He feinted left, then darted right, landing another blow with the stun baton. Krell roared in frustration, his tail lashing out and shattering a row of bottles. "You're tougher than you look, human," Krell snarled. "Thanks," Griff replied, his tone dry. "You're exactly as ugly as I expected." The quip earned him a snarl, but it also bought him a moment. Griff's mind raced. He needed to end this before Krell's backup arrived. He glanced at Zara, who gave him a thumbs up. The bar's defenses were holding, but they wouldn't last forever. With a sudden burst of speed, Griff closed the distance between them. He feigned another strike, then dropped low, sweeping Krell's legs out from under him. The alien crashed to the floor, and Griff was on him in an instant, the stun baton pressed to his throat. "Who sent you?" Griff demanded, his voice cold. Krell laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The Syndicate sends its regards." Griff's blood ran cold. The Galactic Syndicate. He'd hoped to leave that part of his life behind, but it seemed the past had finally caught up with him. He knocked Krell unconscious with a final jolt from the baton, then turned to Zara. "We need to get out of here," he said. "Now." Zara nodded, already gathering her tools. "Where to?" Griff hesitated, then made a decision. "I need to send a message to my son." As they slipped out the back door, the bar's alarms blaring behind them, Griff couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Syndicate wouldn't stop until he was dead, and he knew better than to think he could face them alone. But if there was one thing Griff had learned in his long, tumultuous life, it was that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt and to fight back. The message he sent was short and coded, but it carried the weight of a father's hope and a soldier's resolve. Somewhere out in the vastness of space, his son would receive it. And when he did, the galaxy would learn just how dangerous a human could be. The human outpost on Luna 47 was a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the rusty airlock. Perched on the edge of a desolate crater, the facility was a fortress of steel and concrete, its walls scarred by years of sandstorms and micrometeorite impacts. Inside, the air was sterile, filtered through countless systems to keep the moon's toxic atmosphere at bay. The corridors were silent save for the hum of machinery and the occasional echo of booted footsteps. In the command center, Ethan Griffin stood before a holographic display, his sharp blue eyes scanning the latest intelligence reports. At 32, Ethan was the image of his father, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same steady demeanor. But where Griff's face bore the lines of a life lived hard, Ethan's was still unmarked by time. His Navy SEAL uniform clung to his frame, the insignia on his chest a testament to years of service and sacrifice. "Anything new, Reyna?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with urgency. Reyna Torres. His second-in-command leaned over the console, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She was in her late 20s with a mind as sharp as the tactical knife strapped to her thigh. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up data streams and cross-referencing them with military databases. Nothing concrete, she replied, her tone clipped. "But the syndicate's been unusually quiet. Too quiet. It's like they're gearing up for something big." Ethan frowned. The Galactic Syndicate had been a thorn in humanity's side for decades, but their recent silence was unsettling. He was about to respond when the console beeped, signaling an incoming message. The screen flickered, and a series of coded symbols appeared. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He recognized the code instantly. It was one his father had taught him years ago, a private cipher they'd used to communicate during Griff's military days. His heart pounded as he deciphered the message, each symbol falling into place like pieces of a puzzle. "Syndicate found me. Bar compromised. Need you. Stay safe. Dad." Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned to Reyna, his voice steady but laced with determination. "We've got a mission. Gather the team." 10 minutes later, Ethan stood before his squad in the briefing room. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the impending mission pressing down on them all. Beside Reyna stood Jax Carter, the team's wild card. Jax was in his early 30s, with a mop of unruly blonde hair and a grin that never quite left his face. He was a tech genius with a penchant for explosives, and his hands were already twitching with anticipation. "All right, people," Ethan began, his voice cutting through the silence. "We've got a high-priority extraction the Syndicate's targeting. My father, and they've already made their move. We need to get to him before they do." Tessa Nguyen, the team's medic, raised an eyebrow. She was petite, with a quiet intensity that belied her gentle demeanor. Her dark eyes flicked to Ethan, concern etched on her face. "Your father? I thought he retired." "He did," Ethan replied. "But the Syndicate doesn't forget, and neither do we." Reyna stepped forward, pulling up a holographic map of the spaceport where the rusty airlock was located. "The bar's here," she said, pointing to a blinking dot. "It's a high-traffic area, which means the Syndicate will have to be careful. But they'll also have eyes everywhere. We'll need to move fast and stay under the radar." Jax grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Sounds like my kind of party. What's the plan, boss?" Ethan's gaze swept over his team, each member a vital piece of the puzzle. "We'll split into 2 teams. Reyna and I will handle the extraction. Jax, you're on tech. Disable their tracking systems and create a diversion if things go south. Tessa, you're on standby for medical support. We don't know what kind of shape my father's in, but we need to be ready for anything." The team nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They'd been through hell together, and they knew the stakes. This wasn't just another mission. It was personal. The journey to the spaceport was tense, the team's shuttle cutting through the void of space like a silent predator. Ethan sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the stars. He hadn't seen his father in years, not since Griff had left the military to raise him after his mother's death. Their relationship had been strained, the weight of Griff's past casting a long shadow over their lives. But now, with the Syndicate closing in, none of that mattered. All that mattered was getting to him in time. As they approached the spaceport, Reyna's voice broke the silence. "We've got company, Syndicate, ships, 2 of them patrolling the perimeter." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Jax, can you jam their sensors?" Jax was already at work, his fingers flying across the console. "On it. Give me 30 seconds." The shuttle shuddered as it entered the spaceport's atmosphere, the hull groaning under the strain. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Jax let out a triumphant whoop. "Got 'em. Their sensors are blind. We've got a 5-minute window before they figure out what's going on." "Good," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Let's move." The team disembarked in a secluded docking bay, their movements swift and silent. The spaceport was a labyrinth of corridors and alleys, the air thick with the scent of oil and sweat. Ethan led the way, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. They were close now. He could feel it. As they rounded a corner, they were met with a sight that made Ethan's blood run cold. A group of syndicate operatives, their weapons drawn, were converging on the rusty airlock. The bar's defenses were holding, but it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. Ethan's hand tightened on his weapon. "Reyna, with me. Jax, Tessa, cover our six. We're going in." The team moved as one, their training and camaraderie evident in every step. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anger, determination, but he pushed them aside, focusing on the mission. His father was in there, and he wasn't going to let the syndicate take him. As they breached the bar's defenses, Ethan caught a glimpse of Griff through the chaos. His father was alive, fighting back with the same grit and determination that had defined his life. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that shared glance Ethan saw everything he needed to know. They were going to make it out of this. Together. But as the syndicate's forces closed in, Ethan knew the real fight was just beginning. The bar was a war zone. Shattered glass crunched underfoot, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. The syndicate's operatives had breached the outer defenses, their weapons blazing as they advanced on Griff and his makeshift allies. Griff stood behind the bar, his stun baton crackling in his hand, while Zara crouched beside him, her tool belt bristling with improvised gadgets. Luma, ever the pacifist, had retreated to a corner, her stylus moving furiously as she documented the chaos. "Griff, we're running out of time," Zara shouted over the din, her voice strained but steady. "They're closing in." Griff's jaw tightened as he peered over the bar. The syndicate's forces were methodical, their movements precise and coordinated. He knew they were buying time, waiting for reinforcements to arrive. But time was a luxury he didn't have. "Zara, can you rig the holographic projectors to create a diversion?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. Zara's eyes lit up with a spark of inspiration. "Give me 2 minutes." As she worked, Griff turned to Luma. "You need to get out of here. This isn't your fight." Luma shook her head, her luminous eyes filled with determination. "This is my home too. I won't abandon it, or you." Griff wanted to argue, but there was no time. The syndicate's operatives were advancing, their weapons trained on the bar. He gripped his stun baton tighter, his mind racing. They needed a miracle, or at least a really good distraction. Just then, the door burst open, and Ethan charged. In, his team close behind. The room erupted into chaos as the SEALs engaged the syndicate's forces, their movements swift and precise. Ethan's eyes locked on Griff, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. "Dad!" Ethan shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. Griff's heart swelled with relief, but there was no time for sentiment. "Ethan, watch your six!" Ethan ducked as a plasma bolt whizzed past his head, his training kicking in. He returned fire, taking down an operative with a well-placed shot. Reyna was at his side, her tactical brilliance evident as she directed the team's movements. Jax, meanwhile, was in his element, his hands a blur as he hacked into the bar's systems. "Got it!" Zara exclaimed, her voice triumphant. She slammed a button on her makeshift control panel, and the room was suddenly filled with a cacophony of light and sound. Holographic duplicates of Griff and the team appeared, darting in every direction. The syndicate's operatives hesitated, their focus divided. It was the opening Ethan needed. "Now, push them back." The team surged forward, their movements coordinated and relentless. Griff joined the fray, his stun baton a blur as he took down one operative after another. The syndicate's forces were formidable, but they were no match for the combined might of the SEALs and Griff's resourcefulness. Krell, the hulking reptilian assassin, roared in frustration as his plan unraveled. He lunged at Griff, his claws slashing through the air. Griff dodged, his movements fluid despite his age, and countered with a strike to Krell's side. The alien staggered but didn't fall, his eyes burning with rage. "You're tougher than you look, human," Krell snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Thanks," Griff replied, his tone dry. "You're exactly as ugly as I expected." The quip earned him a snarl, but it also bought him a moment. Griff's mind raced. He needed to end this before Krell's backup arrived. He glanced at Ethan, who was locked in combat with another operative, and made a decision. "Ethan, cover me." Ethan nodded, his movements swift and precise as he provided covering fire. Griff feinted left, then darted right, landing another blow with the stun baton. Krell roared in frustration, his tail lashing out and shattering a row of bottles. With a sudden burst of speed, Griff closed the distance between them. He feigned another strike, then dropped low, sweeping Krell's legs out from under him. The alien crashed to the floor, and Griff was on him in an instant, the stun baton pressed to his throat. "Who sent you?" Griff demanded, his voice cold. Krell laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The Syndicate sends its regards." Griff's blood ran cold. The Galactic Syndicate. He'd hoped to leave that part of his life behind, but it seemed the past had finally caught up with him. He knocked Krell unconscious with a final jolt from the baton, then turned to Ethan. "We need to get out of here," he said. "Now." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Jax, can you rig the bar to blow?" Jax grinned, his hands already moving. "On it. Give me 30 seconds." As the team prepared to evacuate, Griff took a moment to survey the room. The bar was in ruins, but it had held, and so had they. He caught Ethan's eye, and in that shared glance, he saw everything he needed to know. They were going to make it out of this, together. But as the Syndicate's forces regrouped outside, Ethan knew the real fight was just beginning. The Syndicate wouldn't stop until they were all dead, and he wasn't going to let that happen. Not to his father, not to his team. "Let's move," Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with determination. "We've got a galaxy to save." The team moved as one, their bond unbreakable. The bar's defenses were holding, but it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. As they slipped out the back door, the bar's alarms blaring behind them, Griff couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Syndicate had made a mistake. They'd underestimated humanity's resilience, its adaptability, its creativity, and now they were going to pay the price. The message he sent was short and coded, but it carried the weight of a father's hope and a soldier's resolve. Somewhere, out in the vastness of space, his son would receive it. And when he did, the galaxy would learn just how dangerous a human could be. The Syndicate's command ship loomed over the spaceport like a predator waiting to strike. Its sleek, obsidian hull bristled with weaponry, and its engines hummed with a low, ominous vibration that could be felt even from a distance. Inside, the ship's bridge was a hive of activity, its alien crew moving with cold efficiency as they prepared for the final assault. At the center of it all stood Vorath, the Syndicate's warlord, his reptilian features twisted into a sneer of triumph. "Pathetic humans," Vorath muttered, his voice a guttural growl. "They think they can defy us. They will learn the price of their arrogance." On the surface, Ethan and his team moved through the spaceport's labyrinthine corridors, their movements swift and silent. The bar's defenses had bought them time, but they all knew it wouldn't be enough. The Syndicate's forces were regrouping, and the command ship was the key to ending this fight once and for all. "Jax," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent. "Can you disable their shields?" Jax grinned, his fingers already dancing across the holographic interface of his portable console. "Piece of cake. Just give me a minute to—" He paused, his grin widening. "Got it. Their shields are down, but they'll figure it out fast. We've got a 5-minute window." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. 5 minutes. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. He turned to the team, his voice steady but laced with determination. Reyna, Tessa, you're with me. We're going in. Jax, stay here and keep their systems scrambled. Dad—" He hesitated, his eyes meeting Griff's. "You sure you're up for this?" Griff's lips curled into a wry smile. "I've been waiting for this moment for years. Let's finish it." The team moved as one, their bond unbreakable. The command ship's docking bay was heavily guarded, but Ethan's plan was simple. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't stop until the job was done. They breached the bay with precision, their weapons blazing as they took down the Syndicate's guards. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal, the sounds of battle echoing through the cavernous space. As they advanced, Vorath's voice boomed over the ship's intercom, his tone dripping with contempt. "You think you can defeat me? You are nothing but insects, scurrying beneath my feet." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. Actions spoke louder than words, and he was done talking. The team reached the bridge in record time, their movements a blur of coordinated efficiency. Vorath was waiting for them, his massive frame silhouetted against the glow of the ship's control panels. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light as he regarded them, his lips curling into a sneer. "So, the humans have come to die," he said, his voice a low rumble. "How predictable." Ethan stepped forward, his weapon trained on Vorath. "This ends now." Vorath laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You are brave, I'll give you that, but bravery won't save you." The fight was brutal. Vorath was a formidable opponent, his strength and speed far beyond that of a human. But Ethan and his team were relentless, their movements precise and coordinated. Reyna's tactical brilliance kept them one step ahead, while Tessa's medical expertise ensured they stayed on their feet. Griff, despite his age, fought with the skill and determination of a man half his age, his stun baton a blur as he countered Vorath's attacks. But it was Jax who turned the tide. From his position in the docking bay, he hacked into the ship's systems, his fingers flying across the console. "Got it," he exclaimed, his voice crackling over the comms. "I've rigged the ship's core to overload. You've got 2 minutes to get out of there." Ethan's heart pounded as he relayed the message to the team. "We need to move, now!" Vorath roared in frustration, his claws slashing through the air. "You think you can escape? You are trapped!" Ethan's eyes locked on Vorath's, his voice cold and steady. "We're not trapped. You are." With a final coordinated effort, the team overpowered Vorath, his massive frame crashing to the floor. Ethan stood over him, his weapon trained on the warlord's chest. "This is for everyone you've hurt, for everyone you've taken from us." Vorath's eyes burned with hatred, but there was no time for words. The ship's core was overloading, the walls shaking as the countdown reached its final seconds. The team turned and ran, their movements swift and desperate. They reached the docking bay just as the ship's alarms reached a deafening crescendo, the air thick with the smell of burning metal. Jax was waiting for them, his grin wide despite the chaos. "Cutting it close, huh?" "Shut up and move," Reyna snapped, her tone sharp but laced with relief. They made it to the shuttle just as the command ship exploded, the shockwave sending them hurtling through the void. The team clung to their seats. As the shuttle's systems struggled to stabilize, the stars outside a blur of light and motion. When the chaos subsided, Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They'd done it. The Syndicate's command ship was destroyed, and Vorath was gone. But the cost had been high. The bar was in ruins, and the spaceport was a battleground. Yet amidst the destruction, there was hope. Griff clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his eyes filled with pride. "You did good, son." Ethan smiled, the weight of the mission lifting from his shoulders. "We did good, all of us." As the shuttle made its way back to the outpost, the team sat in silence, the bond between them stronger than ever. They'd faced the Syndicate and emerged victorious, but they all knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were still battles to be fought. But for now, they had won. And that was enough.